unlikely pandemics would occur. Dr. Parvati Menon, Assistant Professor in History, All Saints College, will be delivering the talk on tracing the history of pandemics. Now let me welcome Madam Shahina Ali, who is the Assistant Professor and former HOD of the Political Science Department, Mahadevananda University, Mahavidyalaya, Kolkata, West Bengal, since 2014, who will be giving the keynote address to this webinar. Her area of interest is public administration and local self-government, gender studies, issues in human rights, and public policy. She has contributed a number of chapters in edited books and has also edited a book entitled Impact of Partition on Society, Polity and Literature of Bengal. She has also presented a number of research papers in national and international seminars. She takes an active interest in quiz and debate, and she is the Youth Parliament Program Officer of her college. Currently, she is pursuing her PhD in the area of democratic decentralization and governance from Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan. I invite you, madam, to give the keynote address to this webinar, and I wish a grand success for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Deepa ma'am, for your inspiring words. I now request Mrs. Shahina Ali to deliver the keynote address.
I hope I am audible.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Am I clearly audible? Okay, thank you so much. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Principal Madam. At the outset, let me begin by thanking the college management of All Saints College, Thiruvananthapuram, Principal of the college, Dr. Deepa M., the webinar coordinator, Sister Nancy Worrell, and Dr. Parvati Menon, Assistant Professor in the Department of History, for inviting me to speak in this forum. Now, since I have been asked by the organizers to keep my talk brief, I haven't really kept a PowerPoint presentation. What I will be speaking on today is the probable implications of the economic, social, and political dimensions of the corona pandemic. Now to begin with, we are actually in the middle of a crisis, and this crisis has hit us so hard in such a way that there are times we actually cannot fathom or understand what we are going through. And this is actually such a situation that we don't even know when this crisis is going to end. So in this kind of state of mind, when we kind of try to reflect on the possible days ahead, we also try to think of a kind of world we are actually all going to live through when we come out of this crisis. But one thing that I can clearly vouch for is that the world post-corona will be a qualitatively much more different world than which we are living in now. And this is going to be actually vastly different in very many ways. Now, as I told at the outset, I will be speaking on the economic, political, and the social dynamics of the pandemic. Now, one of the major discussed areas is the economic impact of the pandemic. I am no expert in the field of economics because basically I am a student of political science. But what I have actually gathered from the past few months is that, I mean, by reading whatever various economists have been writing in various journals, in various, various articles on the economic impact of the pandemic, what I have gathered is that the kind of economic infrastructure that we have had, the kind of global trade that we have had, the global linkages, the flow of capital and the investment that we had, especially since the middle of 1970s, that kind of architecture is no longer sustainable. Now, some people are saying that some people are saying that this is kind of a crisis to the capitalist world order. Now, if you all can remember that capitalism had also gone through numerous crises even before in this century. Some of the economists are also comparing this economic recession to the Great Depression that happened, as you all know, in late 1929. Now, one of the basic lessons of the economic crisis that the global economy faces is that in order to come out of it, you actually need to generate a lot of demand in the market. And to generate the kind of demand in the market, people should have money. This is actually a famous and oft-repeated Keynesian, John Keynes, if you actually know, a very famous British-American economist, who has made major contributions in the field of macroeconomics. Now, the kind of Keynesian principle was that, the Keynesian prescription that he actually gave was that when you are going through a kind of economic crisis, instead of austerity, you should go for deficit financing. You should give people employment. You should allow the state to intervene. And the government in this situation has to really play a very, very proactive role. Now, the point is that what we have all been witnessing in the country, when we saw thousands and thousands of migrant laborers walking back home, and it was a heart-wrenching sight, as you all must have seen, that these people, all those who were walking back home, neither did they have any cash in their hands, and neither did they have any job. So it is quite obvious that the role of the state and the role of the government becomes extremely important in such a situation, and the state actually cannot escape its responsibility in this regard. This is where actually the state should have stepped in, and it should have told the people that yes, enough jobs are being created, we have been fortunate enough to give you enough jobs. But this is not the case. Now, as you all know, there has been the ration system that is supposedly working in many states, even in the state in which, from which I come, from West Bengal, where the government has also committed another 6 months of free ration to the people. Now, the point is people will have food. People will have food because they have free ration, access to free ration, but they also need cash in their hands. Otherwise, without any cash, how will they buy medicines? How will they go to the doctor when they are ill? But the government actually doesn't want to overspend, as it thinks that giving cash in the hands of these people will lead to a financial deficit pitfall for the government. So this primary need of helping the poor by transferring cash has not happened in the country. And here delay in doing so actually means a delay in, here the question of lives are involved, because we have also seen so many people, so many migrant workers have also died when they were returning back home by trains or buses, or even by walking barefoot home. So actually we will face a much more difficult situation economically than we are facing with the health crisis that we all are witnessing now with COVID. Now, after discussing this economic, after this economic spectrum, what now I will try to analyze is the kind of political situation that we all are facing. Now, what we are witnessing now is the times of social and physical distancing. And in these times of social and physical distancing, it is actually impossible to have the kind of dissenting voices that we actually had earlier, which actually makes democracy possible. Most of you must be knowing that right to dissent is actually the cornerstone of any democratic system of governance. So what is going to happen in a post-corona world, when I go to think of it, I also have to think that what is going to happen to the democratic setup, to our democratic culture, to our right to dissent, which actually is going to be hampered for quite some time. So possibly I think we could think of alternatives, how people can voice their protest, how they will be able to get themselves represented to the system. Now, coming to the social aspect of it, there were certain professions like the various caregivers, the nurses, the cleaners, the domestic help, and along with that, one very important class of people, that is the homemakers. Those were the unpaid labor at home that were highly undervalued in our society. But this crisis has actually taught us that how indispensable these people are, that without their labor, the society actually comes to a standstill. These people, they were not paid sufficiently, but actually they are those people that keep the economy going, but their job was never much appreciated. So this crisis also gives us an opportunity to reflect on the holistic contribution of labor to our society. Now, as you all must be knowing that that here in the country itself, in India itself, some states have fared much better than the others. Now, without much bias, because I'm speaking at a forum, which is being organized by by a college in the state of Kerala. Now, without much bias to it. Now, if you all ask yourselves, you will all know why some states reportedly did or fared better than the others. It was actually the preparedness of those states. For example, if I talk of the state of Kerala, which reportedly has been faring very well in tackling the pandemic, it was because of the robust health infrastructure which was already there in Kerala, and it was better equipped because Kerala already had a virus before, I mean with the Nipah virus, and we all saw how the government had done fairly better than many other state governments. So there has, now the point here that I'm trying to make is that there has to be some major public investment in the health system. States have to invest massively in public health, and it has to develop major health infrastructure in this area. Now, I mean, coming to the last point, that what I would like to make is that after the after the lockdown opens, in many of the states, it has already been open in many of the countries also, and particularly in India, when we all return back to our normal lives, and possibly when the lockdown opens, what major governments, what most governments will do, will actually prioritize on economic growth. But even if you prioritize economic growth over everything else, it is impossible to deny the force of Mother Nature, the environmental degradation that are greed. I mean, Gandhi has said there is enough to satisfy everyone's need, but there is not enough to satisfy everyone's greed. So the environmental degradation that our greed costs to the world is not sustainable. So there needs to be, I mean, governments need to stimulate growth by investing in green technology. Citizens have to raise their voices to protect the environment wherever it is possible. So we need to develop a kind of a conscious approach to environmental issues. And citizens also here need to make a pressing need on the state to reflect on this. As you know, there are major political parties in India where environmental policy is not on their agenda. So I think time has come for it to change. So these are some of the areas which I feel that we must be extremely critical on. I mean, these are the areas where actually we need some some rethinking. Along with this, there are certain other areas also. So I think this is actually a good time to reflect on a part of collective will, because we all have to accept the reality that we all are living in an interconnected world where we must actually strive to develop a global outlook, one in which we could think globally but act locally. And it is here, as you all know, the Sustainable Development Goals that were given by the United Nations, I mean, those could undergo some rethinking. I mean, there has to be some major rethinking in the area of SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, even while keeping, I mean, the 17 principles of SDGs, even while keeping the basic principles of growth, inclusion, and sustainability impact. So this lockdown, I don't think everything is bleak. I mean, there are certain positive sides also to this lockdown. It has actually gone to show us that actually less is more, and never has it become an important time to actually give time to the humanity and also to the earth to heal. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for those inspiring words. I was indeed a very thoughtful, thought-provoking address.
Hello,
Yes.
am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have just finished, and if there are any questions, I can take it up, or I mean, Dr. Parvati Menon, she'll be speaking, I think, on tracing the history of the pandemic. She'll be speaking on the historical impact of the pandemic. So that could also be done. Or I could stay till the end of the session, and then later also, if anybody wants to ask anything, I can take it up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Now I call upon Sister Nancy Worrell, our librarian, to welcome the resource person of the day.
I am delighted to introduce Dr. Parvati Menon, my colleague and friend. As a fellow teacher at All Saints, I would undoubtedly introduce Dr. Parvati Menon as an invaluable asset to All Saints College, whether it is academics or co-curriculars. Dr. Parvati has been there at the forefront of all activities, leading and inspiring students and teachers. At this engaging personality that she has is to no doubt the result of who she has been for her school days. I have come to know that she was an all-rounder right from the school days. She used to take keen interest in quiz, music, elocution, and many more activities. And during postgraduate days, she went ahead to be recognized as the best outgoing students in the year 1992 from Lady Dog College, Madurai. At All Saints, she not only shines in all academic activities, but also her keen interest and achievements in music have entertained us all. Let me mention here that today we are with someone who is an artist in light music with All Indian Radio and has shared stage with playback like Eshudas. Dr. Parvati takes keen interest in women's issues and has delivered multiple talks in various institutions. She has worked at Christnagar School before she moved to All Saints College. At Christnagar, she created the History Club to spread awareness among the students about India's rich cultural heritage. In All Saints College, she initiated the National Integration Program and has held various exhibitions, national seminars, and created Paidriga, the museum. Dr. Parvati is not only recognized as a brilliant history teacher with many national publications and national and international paper presentations to her credit, but she was also awarded the Outgoing Scholar and Educator Award instituted by National Foundation for Entrepreneurs Development on Women's Day this year, 2020. As she talks to us today on tracing the history of pandemics, we can surely hope for a very engaging and enlightening session. I extend a warm welcome to you, Dr. Parvati Menon. Over to you, Teacher Parvati Menon.
Thank you, dear sister, for that wonderful introduction of mine. To begin with, let me tell you all that it is a very proud moment for me that I'm a part of this national webinar, which is being organized by the Department of Library, All Saints College, Trivandrum. And I would also like to thank the college management, all the sisters, our dear principal, Dr. Deepa M., then the coordinator of this webinar, Sister Nancy Worrell, and all my colleagues and friends, especially Sister Nancy for inviting me to be a part of this webinar, for having given me this opportunity. I also would like to thank my friend, Professor Shahina Ali, for that wonderful, insightful perspective of yours on the socio-economic and political impact of pandemics. So I would like to talk to you today on tracing the history of pandemics. So a pandemic is actually an epidemic that is occurring on a very large scale and that crosses international boundaries, usually affecting people at a global level. Throughout the course of history, plagues and epidemics have affected humanity, sometimes changing the course of history and at times signaling the end of civilizations. There has always been an oscillation throughout history. That means changes taking place. There would be a period of health, then there would be a period of disease, again a period of health, again disease. So human civilizations have always been determined by epidemics and pandemics. Now, the word pandemic comes from the Greek word pandemos, where pan means all and demos means the people. There have been a number of significant pandemics recorded in human history, including smallpox, cholera, plague, AIDS, influenza, etc. Influenza pandemics are unpredictable and they are recurring events that have severe consequences on societies worldwide. So these influenza pandemics have struck about 3 times every century since 1500s, that is after the Middle Ages in the modern era, and that is roughly every 15 to 20 years. So in the 20th century, there were 3 influenza pandemics, which were the Spanish flu, the Asian flu, and the Hong Kong flu. Each pandemic harmed human life and economic development. For example, the influenza pandemic of 1918-19, which is called as the Spanish flu, most of you would have heard of the Spanish flu. It killed more than 20 million people in the world, and it has been cited as a very severe pandemic. But the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history was the Black Death, which killed an estimated 200 million people in the 15th century. Now, in order to trace the history of the pandemics, we need to understand some of the key features of a pandemic, which have not been defined by many medical texts. So the first definition of a pandemic would be its wide geographic extension. So pandemic refers to diseases that extend over large geographic areas. It crosses continents before crossing countries. Next would be the disease movement. In addition to the geographic extent, the term pandemic also implies the unexpected disease movement from place to place via transmission. The third feature of a pandemic would be the novelty. None of us heard of the coronavirus until recently, isn't it? So the term pandemic is usually referred to diseases that are very new or at least associated with novel variants of the already existing organisms. The fourth feature would be the severity of the pandemic. Pandemics are not at all mild. They are never mild. They're always very severe and they're very fatal diseases. The fifth feature of a pandemic would be its high attack rates and its explosiveness. Pandemics are characterized by high rates of attack and they are very, very dangerous. The sixth feature would be the minimal population immunity. So population immunity can always be a very powerful anti-pandemic force, and that's the reason why most of us are popping in pills, vitamin C pills, in order to get immunity from the disease. And the seventh and the last feature of a pandemic would be its infectiousness and its contagiousness. Pandemic diseases are infectious. They're transmitted from one person to the other. It can be either through direct transmission, that is from a person to person, or it can be an indirect transmission. So infectious disease outbreaks can easily cross borders to threaten economic and regional stability. And that has already been demonstrated through the earlier ones like the H1N1, the HIV, etc. So evidence suggests that the occurrence of pandemics has increased over the past century due to many reasons like the increased global travel, urbanization, changes in land use, greater exploitation of the natural environment. But all these trends will only continue and they are only going to intensify. So it was not until the shift to agrarian communities that the scale and spread of the diseases increased rapidly. So widespread trade, just like our principal said, widespread trade created new opportunities for human and animal interactions, which led to such epidemics. The more civilized humans became, with larger cities, more trade routes, and also increased contact with different types of people, different kinds of animals, ecosystems, pandemics are going to come in future also. We also have heard of zoonotic diseases that start from animals. And one of the best, you can say, that is a non-pharmaceutical intervention in such diseases would be the closing down of markets which sell meat. So despite the occurrence of pandemics throughout history, there has been one consistent trend all over the time. What is that? A gradual reduction in death rate. So healthcare improvements and understanding the factors that cause the pandemics have been very powerful tools in reducing their impact. Now, in many ancient societies, people believed that spirits and gods inflicted these diseases and they caused destruction upon the people who deserved the anger of the gods. So this unscientific perception or belief often led to disastrous responses that resulted in the death of millions of people. For example, some of you might have heard of the plague during the time of Emperor Justinian. Here, the Byzantine historian Procopius of Caesarea, he traced the origins of plague to China, and he said that it came to the Byzantine Empire via the land and sea routes to Egypt, from where it entered the empire through Egypt, through the Mediterranean ports. So despite his great knowledge in geography, and despite the knowledge he knew that trade had played in the spread of the pandemics, Procopius blamed Emperor Justinian for this outbreak, declaring him to be a devil for having invoked God's punishment for his evil ways. So some historians found that, or they are saying that, this even would have ended Justinian's efforts to reunite the Western and Eastern Roman Empire, and this plague marked the beginning of the Dark Ages. Luckily, humanity's understanding of the causes of the disease has improved, and it has led to a drastic improvement in the response to modern pandemics. Also, as Professor Shahin Ali mentioned, there is a very effective and effective and efficient response systems which are being followed by some of the governments, at least all over the world. We know that the rising global connections and the interactions are a driving force behind the pandemics. So, from small hunting tribes, humanity's reliance on one another has also created opportunities for the disease to spread. So, urbanization in the developing world is bringing more and more rural residents into denser neighborhoods, and increases in population are putting greater pressure on the environment. So as more and more humans move to the cities, there is a sharp decline in biodiversity, which is leading to disturbances in the balance and the relationship between humans and the wild animals. So at the same time, we know that global air traffic has doubled during the past 2 decades. Also, climatic changes have occurred. So these trends are having a profound effect on the spread of such infectious pandemics. So as organizations and governments around the world are asking citizens to practice social distancing to reduce the rate of infection, we know that we cannot maintain social distancing. We can only maintain physical distancing. Man is a social animal. He has to be connected with the world. He has to be connected with the family. He has to be connected with his colleagues. He has to be connected with everyone. So the digital world is allowing people now to maintain connections and commerce like never before. So coming to my topic, I would like to trace 23 of the worst epidemics and pandemics dating from prehistoric times to the modern times to show you my presentation on the 23 pandemics. So, to trace the history of the pandemics from the prehistoric times to the present one. The first recorded epidemic was about 5,000 years ago, and this epidemic wiped out a prehistoric village in China. You can see the picture of the skeletons. The bodies of the dead were stuffed inside a house that was later burned down. No age group was spared, as the skeletons of children, young adults, and middle-aged people were found inside the house. The archaeological site is now called Hamin Banga and is one of the best preserved prehistoric sites in northeastern China. Archaeological and anthropological studies indicate that the epidemic happened quickly enough and there was no time for proper burials, and the site was not inhabited again. So before the discovery of Hamin Banga, another prehistoric mass burial that dates to roughly the same time period was found at a site called Miao Zigu, that was also in northeastern China. So together, these discoveries suggest that an epidemic ravaged the entire region. Now coming to the second epidemic, the plague of Athens that took place in 430 BC in Greece. Around 430 BC, after a war between Athens and Sparta, the rival city-states of Greece, an epidemic destroyed the people of Athens that lasted for 5 years. Some estimates put the death toll as high as 1 lakh. The Greek historian Thucydides, students of history would be knowing him. He is also known as the father of scientific history. Thucydides wrote that people in good health were all of a sudden attacked by violent heats in the head, redness and inflammation in the eyes, the throat, the tongue, all becoming bloody and emitting an unnatural and smelly breath. So what exactly this epidemic was has long been a source of debate among scientists. Many scientists believe that overcrowding of the war, that is the war that took place between Athens and Sparta, that aggravated the epidemic. Sparta's army was stronger, forcing the Athenians to take refuge behind a series of fortifications that protected the city. So despite the epidemic, the war continued, and it ended only in 404 BC when Athens was forced to yield to Sparta. Coming to the third epidemic, the Antonine Plague of 165 to 180 AD in Rome. Many historians believe that the epidemic was first brought into the Roman Empire by the soldiers who were returning home after a war against Parthia. So when soldiers returned to the Roman Empire, along with the spoils of victory, they also brought the Antonine Plague. It may have killed over 5 million people in the Roman Empire. So the epidemic contributed to the end of Pax Romana, the period of Roman peace. That was a period from 27 BC to 180 AD. So Rome was at the height of its power during Pax Romana. But after 180 AD, after the plague, instability grew throughout the empire and it experienced more civil wars and invasions by barbarian troops. Coming to the fourth pandemic, the plague of Cyprian, which attacked Rome from 250 to 271 AD. So this plague was named after Cyprian, Saint Cyprian. He was a bishop of Carthage in Tunisia. And he described this epidemic as the end of the world because it is estimated to have killed about 5,000 people a day in Rome every day. So in 2014, archaeologists in Luxor found what happens to be a mass burial site. You can see the picture of the skulls of the plague victims. Their bodies were covered with a thick layer of lime. Lime has been historically used as a disinfectant. I think even now we use lime as a disinfectant, isn't it? So archaeologists found 3 furnaces which were used to manufacture lime, and also the remains of the plague victims, which were burned in a giant bonfire. Now the plague of Justinian, which I already mentioned to you. So the Byzantine Empire was attacked by this plague, and the plague reoccurred periodically afterwards. Some say that about 10% of the world population died. You can see the picture of the emperor, and then the plague infected the Byzantine Empire. So under his reign, Byzantine Empire reached the peak, but then after the plague, the empire started declining. And at its peak, the empire stretched from the Middle East up to Western Europe. Coming to the Black Death. So Black Death, known as the pestilence or the Great Mortality, was the most fatal pandemic ever recorded in human history. You can see the picture of the victims with swollen bodies, which was a typical sign of the pandemic. So this pandemic traveled from Asia to Europe, leaving devastation in its wake. And some people say that it wiped out over half of Europe's population. And it was caused by a bacteria, Yersinia pestis, that is extinct today. And it was spread by fleas, which infected rodents, that is squirrels, rats, etc. And the bodies of the victims were buried in mass graves. So this bubonic plague changed the course of Europe. With so many people dead, labor started becoming very difficult. And so the laborers were started to be paid more after this plague. And this, you can say, was also a result of, you can say, this ended Europe's slavery or serfdom, because cheap labor ceased to exist now. The studies also suggest that the surviving workers after the plague had better access to food because they were paid more. And maybe because of the lack of cheap labor, this would have even contributed to technological innovations soon after this plague. Next is smallpox, the seventh pandemic. Smallpox was found in Europe, Asia, and Arabia, and it killed 3 out of 10 people it infected, and it also left the rest with scars. The smallpox virus arrived in the 15th century with the first European explorers. I think even around in the society nowadays, we find elder people, some of the elder people at least, having scars, smallpox scars on their faces. So the indigenous people of modern day Mexico and the US had zero natural immunity to smallpox. And centuries later, smallpox became the first virus epidemic to be ended by a vaccine. In the late 18th century, a British doctor, you can see him there, named Edward Jenner, discovered that milkmaids infected with a milder virus called cowpox were immune to the smallpox. So Jenner inoculated his gardener's 9-year-old son with cowpox. It took nearly 2 more centuries, and in 1980, only the World Health Organization announced that smallpox has been completely eradicated from the earth. You can see Edward Jenner inoculating his gardener's son in the picture. Now, the 8th pandemic would be the Cocolizzi pandemic from 1545 to 1548 AD, Mexico and Central America. So this infection was a form of viral hemorrhage, a brain fever that killed nearly 15 million inhabitants of Mexico and Central America. Among a population already weakened by extreme drought, this disease proved to be very, very severe and devastating. Now, the word Cocolizzi is the Aztec word for the term pest. A recent study that examined the DNA from the skeletons of the victims found that they were infected with a subspecies of Salmonella, which causes a fever. And this fever causes dehydration and gastrointestinal problems, and it is still a major health threat today. Now, the next plague, the 9th plague, is the American plagues of the 16th century, which affected North and South America. The American plagues are a cluster of Eurasian diseases brought to the Americas by the European explorers. Another Spanish force, excuse me. So these illnesses, that is the plagues, contributed to the collapse of the Inca and the Aztec civilizations of North and South America. Some say that about 90% of the indigenous population in the Western Hemisphere were killed. So this helped a Spanish force led by Hernan Cortes conquer the Aztec capital in 1590. Another Spanish force led by Francisco Pizarro conquered the Incas in 1532. So Spain took over the territories of both the Aztec and the Inca empires. So they had been badly affected by the disease and they were unable to withstand the Spanish forces. So when citizens of Britain, France, Portugal, Netherlands all began exploring the Americas, conquering, colonizing the area, they were helped by the fact that the disease reduced the size of the indigenous groups that opposed them. Now, coming to the Great Plague of London, 1665 to 1666. So the Black Death's large major outbreak in Great Britain caused a mass moving from London, which was led by King Charles II. The plague started in April 1665 and spread rapidly throughout the hot summer months. So fleas from the plague-infected rodents, that is the squirrels and the rats, were one of the main causes. So by the time the plague ended, about 1 lakh people, including 15% of the population, had died. You can see the plague doctor of those times with his very, typical robe, the mask of a beak with a hat and also a stick in his hand so that he need not have to touch the patient while treating them. So the plague doctor of those times. And then this was not the end of the city's suffering. On September 2nd, 1666, the Great Fire of London, there's a visualization in the slide. It lasted for 4 days and it burned down a large portion of London city immediately after the plague. Now coming to the 11th one, the Great Plague of Marseille in France, 1720 to 1723. Historical records say that the Great Plague of Marseille started when a ship called Grand Saint-Antoine reached Marseille in France, carrying a cargo of goods from the Eastern Mediterranean. Although the ship was quarantined, the plague got into the city somehow, maybe through the fleas on the plague-infected rodents. The plague spread quickly, and over the next 3 years, as many as 1 lakh people died in Marseille and in the surrounding areas. So it is estimated that about 30% of the population of Marseille perished after this plague. Coming to the 11th, not the 11th, it's the 12th pandemic, the Russian plague, 1770 to 1772. In Russia, the plague struck Moscow and other cities. So along with the plague, there was a terror of quarantined citizens. You see the picture. They erupted into violence. Even in present times, we find some of the quarantined people, how they break out in violence because they're not used to staying within the closed doors. And then the governments and the police have a tough time to control them. The same thing happened in Russia in 1770s. So the riots spread throughout the city and it ended with the murder of Archbishop Ambrosius. He was encouraging crowds not to gather for worship. Now the Empress of Russia, Catherine II, you can see her there, she was also known as Catherine the Great. She was so desperate to control that she ordered a proclamation saying that all factories should be moved from Moscow. So by the time the plague ended, as many as 1 lakh people had died. So even after the plague ended, Catherine had struggled to restore order. And in 1773, Peter III, who was Catherine's executed husband, led a violent movement that resulted in the death of thousands more after the plague. The next is the Philadelphia yellow fever epidemic, 1793, which struck the US capital. So when yellow fever struck Philadelphia, The officials wrongly believed that African slaves were immune to this epidemic. So the African slaves were recruited to nurse the sick. But actually, the disease was carried and transmitted through mosquitoes, which increased greatly during the hot and humid summer weather in Philadelphia that year. But when the winter arrived, luckily, the mosquitoes died out and the epidemic ended. But here again, around 5,000 people had died. Now coming to cholera, the 14th pandemic. In the early, that is mid-19th century, cholera spread in England, killing thousands of people. So the prevailing scientific theory of the day was that the disease was spread by the foul air, which was then known as miasma or miasma. But a British doctor, you can see him there, John Snow, suspected that the origin of this mysterious disease, which killed its victims right during the first days of the symptoms, was not miasma, but he felt it was the drinking water of London. Though Snow's efforts didn't cure cholera immediately, it led to a global effort to improve urban sanitation, and protect drinking water from contamination. So while cholera has largely been eradicated in developed countries, we know that it's still a killer disease in developing countries. So you can see the advertisement there, not to drink any water which has been previously been boiled. We know the importance of drinking boiled and filtered water now, isn't it? So cholera can come at any time. So it is still a killer disease in developing countries because of the lack of proper sewage treatment and access to clean drinking water. Now the flu pandemic, 1889 to 1890. The flu pandemic, you can see in the modern industrial age, new transport facilities made it easy for the influenza viruses to create danger. So in just a few months, this flu pandemic spanned the globe, killing nearly 1 million people. And it took just 5 weeks to reach peak mortality. You can see the picture there. And the earliest cases were reported in Russia, and then it spread from St. Petersburg throughout Europe and then to the rest of the world. Next, the 16th pandemic is the American polio pandemic. A polio pandemic started in New York City, and it caused 27,000 cases and 6,000 deaths in the US alone. The disease affects mainly children, and sometimes it leaves survivors with permanent disabilities. President Roosevelt, you can see his statue there, he was diagnosed with polio in 1921 at a very early age of 39. So polio epidemic occurred occasionally in the US, and it killed thousands of people until the Salk vaccine. You can see the doctor administering the Salk vaccine, which was developed in 1954. So as the vaccine became widely available, the cases in the US started declining. So the last polio case in the US was reported in 1979. Worldwide vaccination efforts it has greatly reduced the disease, and although it has not been completely eradicated. And all of us know about the pulse polio program of our government. Polio drops are administered for children below a certain age, but in spite of that, we can see a lot of polio affected people in and around us. The next would be the Spanish flu. We are, of course, commemorating 100 years of the outbreak of the Spanish flu now. An estimated 500 million people fell victim. 1/5 of the people died, and some indigenous communities became extinct also. The flu spread and danger was increased by the fact that the wartime nutrition of the soldiers and also the people who attended the war. You know that this was a period of the end of the First World War. So more number of people died due to the Spanish flu than those who perished fighting the First World War. Despite the name Spanish flu, the disease did not start in Spain. Spain was actually a neutral country during the First World War, but then it did not enforce strict censorship of its press. So people could freely publish accounts of the disease. So people falsely believed that the disease was specific to Spain, and it started in Spain because it was a Spanish press that first announced the flu. And that's how the name Spanish flu struck. You can see the picture of the health workers all wearing masks. It's almost similar to the picture that we have 100 years later. Now, people, because of the overcrowding of the tents, people are being treated outside. So, closing of educational institutions is actually a very important non-pharmaceutical intervention during pandemics. And during the 1918-1920 Spanish flu also, there was timely closing down of schools and institutions. There was cancellation of public gatherings. Also, this cancellation of public gatherings and closing down of schools all led to reduced mortality. There was no vaccine to protect the people against the influenza, and there were no antibiotics also to treat the secondary bacterial infection. But control efforts worldwide were limited to non-pharmaceutical interventions, like there was isolation then, quarantine was followed, a good personal hygiene was administered. I mean, not administered, it was advised. There was use of disinfectants, etc., which were all applied universally. And this picture will give you an idea of how people in quarantine, this is an advertisement that came in the papers in those days, 100 years back. So people in quarantine will not be isolated if they have a bell telephone. So that was the advertisement. And see the public notice that came, how, because of the Spanish influenza, schools, public and private, then churches, theaters, picture halls, school rooms, other places of amusement, lodge meetings, they are to be closed down until further notice. So it's exactly the same picture of the present pandemic. Next is the Asian flu from 1957 to 1958. So the Asian flu pandemic was another global influenza pandemic. With its roots in China, the disease claimed more than 1 million lives. The virus that caused the pandemic was a blend of avian flu viruses, the H2N2 virus. It's said to have originated from the mutation of wild ducks. So the disease spread rapidly and was reported in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and in the coastal cities of the US in 1957. So death toll was more than 1.1 million worldwide, with about 1,16,000 deaths occurring in the US alone. You see the people being treated in a mass hall. Coming to the 19th pandemic, the 1968 pandemic, which is also known as the Hong Kong flu. It was caused by an influenza, that is the H3N2 virus, including a new H3 one from the old H2 virus of 1957. So it was first noted in the US in September 1968. The estimated number of deaths was 1 million worldwide and about 1 lakh in the US alone. Most of the deaths were in people 65 years and older. The H3N2 virus continues to circulate worldwide even now as a seasonal influenza. The 20th pandemic is the AIDS pandemic and epidemic, 1981 to the present. So AIDS became a global pandemic in the 1980s, and it continues to be an epidemic in certain parts of the world. So it is claimed an estimated 35 million lives since it was first identified. HIV, which is a virus that causes the AIDS, likely developed from a chimpanzee virus that was transferred to humans in West Africa in 1920s itself. So the virus made its way throughout the world, and the AIDS became a pandemic by the 20th century. Now about 64% of the estimated 40 million people living with the HIV, that is the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, they live in the sub-Saharan Africa. For decades, the disease had no cure. Please would you mute your mics? Somebody has unmuted the mic. It would be nice if you could mute your mic. Thank you. For decades, the disease had no cure, but medication developed in the 1990s, and it now allows people with the disease to experience a very normal life with regular treatment. So even more encouraging is that a few people have been cured of HIV as early as 2020. Coming to the 21st pandemic, the H1N1 swine flu pandemic, 2009 to 2010 in Mexico. The 2009 pandemic, swine flu pandemic, was caused by a new strain of H1N1 that originated in Mexico in the spring of 2009 before spreading to the rest of the world. In 1 year, the virus infected as many as 1.4 billion people across the globe and killed between 151,700 people and around more than 5 lakh people globally. So the 2009 flu pandemic primarily affected children and young adults, and 80% of the deaths were in people younger than 65. That was unusual because most strains of flu virus, including those of the seasonal flu, cause the highest percentage of deaths in people above the age of 65. But in the case of this swine flu, older people seem to have been already built up immunity to the HIV, to the H1N1 virus of the earlier pandemic. And so the people above the age of 65 were not affected much during this pandemic. You can see how the pandemic spreads from the swines to the humans, and the symptoms include fever, nausea, and sore throat. The 22nd pandemic would be the West African Ebola epidemic from 2014 to 2016. Ebola affected West Africa between 2014 and 2016 with 20,000 cases and around 11,325 deaths. The first case reported was in Guinea in December 2013. Then the disease quickly spread to Liberia and Sierra Leone. The majority of the cases and deaths occurred in these countries, that is Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. A small number of cases occurred in Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, the US, and Europe also. There is no cure for Ebola, although efforts are going on to find a vaccine. The last pandemic I will be touching, the 23rd pandemic, which is the Zika virus epidemic, which broke out in 2015, and it is there even now. Scientists are trying their best to bring this Zika virus epidemic under control. The Zika virus is usually spread through mosquitoes of the Aedes genus. And although it can be sexually transmitted also in humans, you can see the 3 different ways of transmission of the Zika virus, either through the bite of the infected mosquitoes, from the mother to baby in the womb, through sexual activity, and also through blood transfusion. It can attack, infects the womb, cause birth defects. The type of mosquitoes that carry Zika flourish best in warm, humid climates, making South America, Central America, and parts of southern US prime areas for the virus to function. Excuse me. Yes, so having given you an idea about some of the pandemics that ravaged human history, I would like to say that all of us know, of course, a solution to the present pandemic has not yet been achieved. Revolutionary changes have come in the present life world. But when we look through a social scientific lens, there have been many changes in the social metrics. The connection of history as a discipline from the past is being reflected in the present also. Yes, history repeats itself. There will be pandemics in future also. So certain inferences can be made through the observations of the contemporary society in reflection to the past. Yes, first is the masked world. The masked world has become very normal now, all over the world, irrespective of the state systems, whether it is a capitalist or a communal system, etc. You can't identify a person with a mask, can you? No. But if a person approaches you without a mask, you're very scared. A person with a mask has a very different kind of meaning in the present pandemic society. We are all forced to wear the mask, but we also respect each other with our masks, isn't it? We know that with our masks, we are here to defeat the virus. Yes, the masked world. So there are different kinds of masks available now. And the cultural identity has adapted into the making of masks. We have the designer masks, the disposable masks, we can wear masks according to our, we can match it with our attire. Also, we have the studio masks. Recently, in a studio in Kottayam, we need to take a photograph, go to the studio, and the nose and mouth portion would be imprinted on the mask, which will help others identify you. So studio masks have also come. So masks have become a cultural artifact now. Once upon a time, masks were used to separate and malign. People with a mask were considered to be evil, but now masks have a very different meaning in a present world. Now, the second inference would be the social distancing. More than social distancing, it is physical distancing now. This is a picture of a market area in India where people are practicing social distancing. But in the pre-COVID times, there was intensive social integration. There were celebrations of marriage, festivals. But now, who's celebrating? We are not celebrating, but the virus is celebrating, and we are all in confinement. Calendars decided everything previously. But now the significance of calendar has reduced. Schedules have no meaning nowadays because most of us are working from home. Timetables have become irrelevant now. They are just past documents to see what our present life was like. Even distances have lessened now. People are walking thousands of kilometers now. Apart from the global citizens, we also have highway citizens now, the migrant laborer who Professor Shaheen Ali was talking about, who are working citizens. They are highway citizens. I would call them the highway citizens. They're trying to get back to their faraway homes. The teachers are also distanced from students, isn't it? Online classes have become the fashion now. And the third inference is the quarantine. Human bodies are segregated. This has resurfaced a deep historical legacy. We know that the word quarantine has its origin from ancient times. The practice of quarantine began in the 14th century in order to protect coastal cities from the plague. The careful port authorities required ships coming to Venice in Italy from infected ports to remain at the anchor for 40 days before entering. So the origin of the word quarantine is from the Italian word quaranta giorni, which means 40 days. But now, for our convenience, we have reduced the 40 days to 14 days. And in between, it was also Trentino, which was 30 days during the medieval world. Yes, so confinement is the worst thing that can happen to anyone, isn't it? Especially during this quarantine. But ideas usually come during solitary confinement. There are a lot of examples in history. I can give you one, like Machiavelli wrote his famous book, The Prince, while he was in confinement. So confinement gives you ideas. Sometimes events also become important in history. A small virus has influenced our lives, and this pandemic has paused human civilization. Masks and hand sanitizers came one fine morning. So this present pandemic has been one of the greatest events of the 21st century, and it has made a new orientation by creating a new metrics. But what will happen once a new vaccine is invented or a vaccine is invented? The crisis is gone. But at least for now, there is an intense consciousness. What is that? A collective emotion, a new cultural emotion that rules the world: fear. The medieval world was unified over the cultural evolution of fear. In modern times, there is a change from the bacteria. So earlier pandemics were caused due to bacteria, but now it's become the virus. There's no class distinction in this universal evolution of fear. There is a proliferation of online classes. So teachers are also fearing now. What is the fear of the teachers? They not only fear the technology, but also the surveillance of the parents of the students now. So we need to see that the parents, we need to understand that the parents are also watching while teachers take class. And the other thing which I have noticed is that the state has now become a savior. So there is a recovered image of the state. There is police surveillance. So there is enforced discipline. Fundamental rights of citizens are affected, but we cannot do anything. Devices are used to detect people with infection. Health workers are heroes now. The public healthcare system is glorified. All governments are using almost a similar mechanisms to check the spread of pandemics. Music and other art forms have become a therapy to overcome the threat of the fear factor. All of us are practicing different hobbies now, especially during this triple lockdown. Hobbies are becoming very important. Also, the visual media has changed. Films are being released online. But can everybody enjoy them? No, only those who have access can enjoy. New medical systems have come. New indigenous medical approaches have come. So, but there is more bonding of family. So the pandemic has taught us that we need not any longer have globalization. We should have, but what we need now is not globalization, but global integration. We can see the interdependency of human civilization now. We've all become global citizens. So global citizens are there, highway citizens are there, but we have become more humane. Our approach is very humanistic now. There are no religious conflicts. In fact, people of different religions are coming together to pray for the doctors. The scientists are, they are praying for the doctors and scientists all together to give them strength to deal with the situation. So relationships have become genuine now. Self-realization has come. We have learned self-sufficiency. So without our domestic help, we have learned to cope up with work at home. Community spirit has increased. Our lifestyles have become healthier. Working has become remote. We are all working in virtual spaces now. Environment is cleaner now. But we are showing a little bit of concern for the vulnerable. And most importantly, we all have more time to think. We are not running behind schedules now. We are not running to attend business meetings. We are not too busy like how we used to be earlier. So pandemics are actually lessons for us. There are restrictions imposed on our personal life, marriages, etc. But can't we correct ourselves individually in future without restrictions from the government by making our celebrations simpler? We need to realize that it is the over-ambitious nature of humans that has, in a way, led to the pandemic. So to conclude, I would like to bring some of my concluding inferences to the presentation, to the slide.
Thank you, Teacher Parvati.
It's the last slide, sister. I just want to bring out my conclusion here.
Okay,
So
okay, sorry.
influences are, yes, the last one.
Okay, okay,
So,
you can carry on, please.
yes, sister. So these are my conclusions. Pandemics are actually historical pauses. They are neither the beginning nor the end, especially the present pandemic. It is a pause for us to think about our future and how we were in the past. So there is confinement in spite of all advancements. We are all confined, our rights have been curtailed, but we know that we have all advancements. What would vulnerability of poorer sections? The poorer sections are vulnerable. Even though we are helping the poor, but we find that those of us who are having a steady income, we are all having a reasonably good time. But what about the people who have lost their jobs, who are daily wage earners? So we can find the vulnerability very visible now. So are the humans the only issue? No, but it's the rationality of the system. So humans are just a chain in this whole system. When we analyze deeply, humans cannot be the main cause for the pandemic, but they are all ingrained into this system, which is, uh, you know, full of, the scientific advancements and technological skills. Then you find the capital system. So all this are the factors which make the humans behave in such a manner. Humans are a part of the system. And finally, man's obsession with technology is very evident nowadays. So the pandemic, I would say, is actually a good pause for not only you, for me, and it is a lesson for all of us to see what the future holds for us. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, sister.
Dr. Parvati ma'am.
Yes.
Now, those who are interested to ask question, kindly do so.
The measures we are taking now, actually, the measures may be sufficient, but then the attitude of the people have to change in the sense we need to be more careful. We should not think that without wearing mask or without sanitizing, we will not be effective. So the governments are trying their best to control the pandemic, but then our attitude is also very important. We should be we should obey the rules and regulations which the government is giving us, which the government is forcing us to do, because it is, the pandemic doesn't have any distinction. It doesn't show any discrimination, rich, poor, healthy, unhealthy, or it doesn't have any. So we have to play our role in obeying the governments, which is very important during this pandemic. And then wearing of masks, social distancing, and quarantine are, of course, the best ways. And also washing hands. And the Indian culture of Namaste is the best way of expressing our gratitude to people. So that way, I should say that. Also, yoga. Yoga would be a good measure to keep us healthy. Yes. Any other points to be noted or discussed?
Hello, ma'am.
You can write to the chat. Yes,
Oh,
you can also ask me.
oh,
Adira, yes.
yes, Adira. I would like to say a very big thank you before starting my question to Shahina ma'am and Parvati ma'am as well. Parvati ma'am, maybe you might know me because I belong to All Saints. I'm doing my S4 MA literature there.
Okay, okay. Fine.
So my question is that, and I'm very happy to see you all again, Cecilia sister, Nancy sister, Parvati ma'am, and all of you, because we have been very distant for a few days now. My question
Yeah.
is that we know that nowadays pandemics are giving us or an insight to the collective memory, and we
Mhm.
have many things in common like loss, fear, agony, economic depression, health issues of in all the cases health issues is the major thing that is having in common from all those years. So my
Yeah.
question is that did these epidemics create a collective consciousness that passed through all these centuries and is making us also a part of that?
Collective consciousness, in the sense, I think the only consciousness that we learned, or which is a common factor, would be the fear factor, I think, because um, history gives us lots of lessons to learn from, isn't it? So when we look at the previous pandemics, they were all caused due to different kinds of reasons. The reasons were very, some of the reasons were, most of them were due to the transmission from infected rodents, etc. But this collective consciousness that you are asking, of course, collective consciousness in the sense, the fear factor was common throughout the pandemics, and then the people, they tried their best to contain the pandemics with the help of quarantine, social distancing, etc. And or else, of course, the earlier pandemics have given us, I think when I trace the history of pandemics, I was able to tell you how each and every pandemic had its own period of time. It did not last for many years. It died within 3-4 years. But then every pandemic had its own lesson to convey. So the people who were affected with the following pandemic had certain lessons to learn from the earlier pandemic also. And the collective consciousness of fear was there during the earlier times, the Middle Ages, and all of us are having that fear even now, isn't it? We are all scared when we are going to get infected. So that fear, as long as it is there among us, it is a good factor in the sense it will all help us. This fear factor will help us in, sustaining ourselves, in order to be very, very vigilant and conscious. I hope I've answered your question, or if you have any suggestions, or if you have any more points, you can. Coronavirus has shown us that fear can be just as debilitating. Let me see. The last question. Yes, of course. These pandemics are an opportunity for our species to learn and evolve. Diseases are nature's way of teaching us, definitely. And if we want to survive, it is critical that we listen to these lessons, study the history, and continue to expand our consciousness. Very true. That was not a question, that was just... Is there any question on the... Or for the students' sake, I would like to give you a small difference between the epidemic, pandemic, and endemic. So endemics are usually diseases which affect a small community, whereas epidemics are diseases which affect one country, some people in a country, etc. And pandemics are diseases which cross countries, and it is at a global level. So maybe an additional P would be the difference to the pandemic and the epidemic. So epidemic and with a P is the pandemic. So the P is, that is, it is on a global level. Are there any more questions?
Ma'am, good evening. Ma'am,
Yes.
my name is Aryan Bose.
Yes.
Ma'am, I have already mentioned the question, but it's okay, fine. But ma'am,
Yeah.
your presentation was so good. My question is that, ma'am, what do you think, what's the impact on the education on the course of this pandemic?
Yes, that is a very...
Like we students are facing a series of problems and a series of good advantages as well. Can you say some of these impact on these pandemic and education going parallel?
Definitely, we are all witnesses to it, isn't it? Like all of us, at least those who are in the teaching field, we all know the impact of this present COVID-19 pandemic in the field of education. Classes have become online, but then nothing will, or nothing can replace the real classroom, the impact the teacher has on her students, her or his students. So educational system has become really different. Society itself, I would say, has become a turntable. So Now we are all speaking to the electronic devices. There are no students in front of us. So I think the most affected lot of students are the primary kids, where, this is a time when they need to be in the classroom with their friends and the teacher talking to them personally and giving them all kinds of, educational tools, etc. But then for the for the older children, or for the school going and the high school children, high school students and the college students, some of them might even take advantage of this educational system. When we take online classes, we know most of the students are in the meeting, but then they are leaving without switching on their cameras. We don't know whether they are even listening to the classes. So that is a real, it's a very sad thing, the genuinity of classroom teaching is gone. And I hope the pandemic gets over soon, a virus is invented. And education is going to be like this, I think, for another couple of months until the vaccine. We don't know when the vaccine is going to be invented. They say it's going to be found out in 3-4 months' time, but then that is also a question. So education system has been affected a lot because online methods, the virtual classrooms are, of course, in a way, you can say that it is helping the students who are stuck in their homes, and because the students are the it is to the students that the pandemics can spread. So it's really good that we don't have the physical classes, but then again the education system has changed a lot, and it will be like this until the vaccine is found out. I think we only have to experiment on the online teaching and the other things, which actually is so. What we need to think is that the UGC, what the UGC was not able to do for us to make the education system digital, now the pandemic is doing, isn't it? So we are all forced to, come to this platform. So even this webinar, we are being able to have this webinar only because of the new tools that are being. So earlier there was only one Zoom application, but now we have the WebEx and whatnot. Google Meet is there. We have the GoToMeeting. So many apps are also there. So the students can also experiment. They can also find out new methods and new technology, etc. I hope I've answered you. Most of the time, it's a marginal piece.
Ma'am.
Yeah,
Parvati ma'am.
thank you, ma'am.
Parvati ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can I ask a
Navneeta.
question?
Yes. I have a question here, Navneeta. Just one. Most of the time, it's a marginal people who are worsted. So I think they receive the. No, I don't think so. I think that was made very clear by Professor Shahina Ali, because marginally affected people, the contract laborers, they need to be supported with money, or they need to be given jobs, especially those who have come from abroad seeking asylum, the NRIs, etc., who are jobless, and also the marginal people. They are the worst hit. So they are not receiving necessary support, but then the government has lack of funds, we know that, but they should be a little more conscious, and they should be a little more caring for the marginalized by providing them support. A ration is being given, I know, free ration is being given, etc. But then some jobs and then loans can be given to start small businesses, etc. Navneeta?
Ma'am, can I ask my question?
Sure, you can.
Ma'am, my question is how did the lockdown syndrome had affected the
Affected the
mental health?
That's a good question. So actually, psychological issues have increased during the pandemic, and we know domestic violence reached its peak mainly because the person who is creating, who is doing the violence, and the affected person, they are all in the same place. So the affected person, so everybody is together in their homes. So people are not allowed to go out. So the abuser is abusing the affected. Okay, so domestic violence is increasing. At the same time, the mental state of the people, because the fear, they've lost their jobs, they don't know how to run the family. Some of them, they are fearing the disease. People,
Yes.
even some people who are in quarantine, you find cases of them committing suicide because of the fear. Actually, this COVID pandemic is not a fatal disease as far as my reading goes. It's the way you treat yourself. Taking, preventives, and then, treatments like gargling or having water boiled with turmeric, etc. So all those things can reduce the effect of the pandemic. Only thing is you need to do proper measures. So the mental stress of the people have definitely become very bad. Suicide rates have increased. Mainly it is because of the fear factor.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And do you think the administrative bodies are effective to tackle this issue?
We have to tackle, there's no other go. But then more counseling is needed for such
Yes.
victims. And then, meditation is important. Yoga can be administered. Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
all these can actually control the mental state of the people, and, they can give some, listening to music.
Yes, ma'am.
Being a musician myself, I would say listening to music and even singing
Yes,
is a
ma'am.
stress buster, which will reduce your mental stress very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any,
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
any other question? Any other question?
Thank you very much, Dr. Parvati. Now I invite Sister Cecilia Carvalho, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, to propose the vote of thanks.
All the discussed here come to the end of on tracing the history of pandemics. To express my vote thanks to everyone who has helped to make this event a success. First of all, let us show our deep appreciation and thanks to our patron, Reverend Mother Mary Francis, who has been our mentor, guide, and strength in the conduct of this program. My sincere thanks is also due to Director, Reverend Sister Belinda Pereira, for her valuable help, and to our principal, Dr. Deepa M., for her unfailing support and encouragement in this endeavor. My thanks are due to Mrs. Shahima Ali, Assistant Professor and former Head of Department of Political Science, Mahadevananda Mahavidyalaya, West Bengal, for delivering the keynote address. It really set the tone for the webinar. Thank you, ma'am, for having obliged to our invitation to be a part of this webinar and by sharing your insightful thoughts. We are indeed delighted to have collaborated with you. Hope we collaborate very soon in the future too. My special thanks are to Dr. Parvati Menon for her distinguished and erudite presentation on the history of pandemics. Thank you for taking us through such a wonderful voyage of information. Thank you, Parvati. I also take this opportunity to thank all the wonderful people here at the webinar who made themselves available to be part of this discourse and for the meaningful interaction and dedicated attention. Thank you very much. It was a delight to be part of this very current and topical discussion on pandemics, an issue that is perhaps the most relevant concern we have today. Thank you all for the fruitful time. God bless you and stay safe. I request all the participants to fill the feedback form, which is available in the chat box. Once again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Parvati, for the nice presentation. I once again appreciate Sister Nancy for coordinating the seminar with the most relevant topic that is now prevailing. And let this be an inspiration for all other teachers also to present such webinars in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, I can't see you. You sit properly. All the participants are requested to fill the feedback form and see that you put your correct email ID. I repeat, see that you put your correct email ID. Thank you.